Brand New Day is a weird story. So, Brand New Day is the new direction status quo for Spider Man after the events of One More Day. So, One More Day was a story in which Peter made the deal with the devil to keep his aunt alive, who was dying at the time. Peter was selfish and treated his marriage with his wife, Mary Jane, causing history to change, so he never married Mary Jane in the first place. In a story called A Moment in Time, it actually submits what's happened in this new timeline to actually affect Mary Jane and Peter not getting married. It also has Peter going to Doctor Strange and having him conceal his identity. It's a whole issue of itself. And that's where we are. That all happened, and it was more or less Marvel editorial trying to get Peter Parker as a character they remembered him to be. And all this leads into Brand New Day, which is the new direction of Spider-Man. So Peter is living back with his aunt. He doesn't have a job except working at the Daily Bugle, which pays little of his money. He doesn't have a place on his own. He's not in a relationship, any kind of stable relationship. Mary Jane isn't even mentioned once in this comic, other than that indirect mention. And that's where we are in Peter's life. With all that out of the way, let's get into today's issue where I go over Brand New Day and see if Marvel's choices were right for the character. So, Amazing Spider-Man issue number 546 is written by Dan Slott. The first page of Brand New Day has Peter kissing a woman that isn't Mary Jane. It's a page that's meant to grab readers and tell them Peter's life is all types of different. He's not in a boring marriage that you don't care about. He finally has a chance of dating a whole variety of women, any woman he wants. He's back to the bachelor life. It's a point made at least 4 times throughout this single issue, and I don't think it works because you're just alienating people who just like the marriage in the first place. After that first page, we then see a mugger who's wearing a Spider-Man mask and just robbing a guy. And after the mugger leaves the recent victim, the guy thinks the mugger was the actual Spider-Man, which is just too funny. I'm not bringing this up for any reason. The mugger actually plays a part in this first arc of the story. After that, a news reporter explains how Spider-Man's not been seen in weeks. And how about a red-headed superhero named Jackpot that everyone loves for some reason, who was just introduced in this first issue, is amazing. Everybody just loves her for some reason. I should point out that Jonah is in the same room with the news reporter. They kind of talk about how the Daily Bugle is going out of business or being bought out, as I understand it, in the first issue because Spider-Man's not been seen for weeks, but the Bugle is still trying to report on Spider-Man not being active in the city. So, since they have nothing to report about, the business itself is going under, which I find utterly just ridiculous. With that, we get a transition to see what Peter's been up to. He's been at his aunt's house, living there because he doesn't have enough for an apartment, and he's a loser. After that, his aunt gets him up, and he tries to find some jobs with his co-worker Betty Brand from the Bugle calling him up and saying that she actually found a crappy apartment for him. Good. Peter then says, "That's great, but I gotta go looking for a job." So he goes to 3 different job interviews. One for a teacher, which makes sense because before Brand New Day, Peter was a teacher and it was a new status quo, which I kind of enjoyed and wish lasted a bit longer. He then goes to a photographer job, and the guy says it's the worst technique I've ever seen. It looks like he left the camera on a ledge and walked away or something. Great. Just greatness right there. The last position is for a lab assistant, and that interview doesn't go well at all because after Peter left or graduated from college, he didn't actually go to secondary school and didn't do anything in the scientific field. He hasn't really done anything at all with his degree, if I think in this new timeline. After all of this, Peter then sits at Gargoyle and feels lost until his pal Harry Osborn calls him up. One thing I need to explain to you all is that Harry Osborn died from an overdose of the Goblin Flare 20 years prior to this story. Then in One More Day, he pretty much shows up and is magically alive and well after Peter sells his marriage. And he has a new girlfriend as well named Lily Hollister, who might just be my least favorite character in Brand New Day series. Lily also has a roommate named Carly Cooper, who's a cop. So Harry asks everybody if they want to go to a club, and everyone agrees to him, and that's where we get caught up on Peter kissing that girl in the first page of the book. It turns out this girl was just someone who wanted to be in Harry's entourage and just tried to get with Peter because of that. She tries to corner Peter twice, but he walks in the bathroom and jumps out of the open window. He then bumps into Carly and they have a little cute back and forth until the spider mugger comes to rob both of them. Peter thinks of taking this guy out, but Carly prevents him because the guy has a gun and she's kind of concerned about the situation. He steals one of Peter's web shooters and wallet and then proceeds to run away. Peter manages to get a spider twitcher on him and is about to change into his outfit, but then sees a newspaper about the no spotty action. So Peter doesn't want his image to be ruined and for Jameson to sell more papers. So he just goes after this guy in his street clothes. He almost immediately loses him because he runs into his aunt who works at the Feed Center, which helps those in need in New York City. It's a new direction for Aunt May at this point. So the guy gets away and Peter goes to the Bugle to get his paycheck. The problem with this, though, is the Bugle can't actually pay him. And that's because the Daily Bugle hasn't sold a paper in weeks because Spider-Man hasn't been around. So he barges into Jonah's office and tries to talk to him about his paycheck. Jonah, however, yells at him back because he's dealing with a lot and calls Peter ungrateful. Peter yells back about how he risked his life to get those photos for him and how those photos made the Bugle and made Jameson. So Jameson, who's just obviously stressed, has a heart attack and falls over, and Peter in his mind blames himself for this, obviously. And that's the end of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 546 by Dan Slott. So let's talk about this issue itself. I thought it was decent. It wasn't great, but it was okay. Peter makes out with a woman who isn't Mary Jane, lives at Aunt May's house, and somehow still works at the Daily Bugle. The weird thing is, not too long ago, Peter had a stable housing arrangement, a stable relationship, and a stable job as well. Marvel doesn't have that much reverence for those stories told with Mary Jane and Peter being married and him having, moving forward as a character. It doesn't really seem that way with this issue. That's why Harry's magically alive and Peter's life is crappy again and Mary Jane isn't really mentioned instead of, other characters popping up and, new situations arising and some situations that are familiar to the writers themselves and not really the readers because at this point, Peter's life was almost completely different and now it's just back to how it was in, the 80s or the 70s. And that really kind of sucks because anyone who was reading Amazing Spider-Man at this point would have been totally thrown off by the situation in which Peter's life is completely different. So, the first of these few stories has been written by Dan Slott, the writer who would write Superior Spider-Man and go over to write the series where Peter Parker would effectively just become Iron Man and run his own company called Peter Industries. I think Dan would be, or get to be better at writing and writing Peter Parker, but for this series, it doesn't present a great picture of Peter as Spider-Man. He doesn't really do anything Spider-Man related or have that sense of morality that I honestly like. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'm honestly thinking of covering the rest of the Brand New Day series, but it's a lot with a lot of different writers and artists as a series, so it would take a long time to write or make videos about it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.